In the latest episode, we witnessed a tense moment as Carlisle dined with all the distinguished guests at the castle. Meanwhile, Raffle received a crucial message revealing that the Empire plans to annul Ashia and Carlisle's marriage. The reason? Their marriage is perceived as nothing more than a facade. If they fail to prove its authenticity, the Empire will have no choice but to dissolve it. After dinner, Carlisle's frustration over the letter was palpable. Bailey pointed out that the involvement of the temple is necessary for any marriage annulment, which suggests that this scheme had already been coordinated with High Priest Gabriel, who has grown increasingly close to the Empress in recent times. Agitated, Carlisle turned to Bailey and asked, "Shall we go out for some fresh air?" Bailey responded with a question of his own, "Where would you like to go?" Carlisle, still irritated, casually replied that they could see what was being harvested, anything to distract him. As they strolled, Carlisle noticed the townsfolk and remarked that the area now seemed more alive, the health of the people visibly improved from before. His keen observation led him to ask Bailey if it was true that a harvest festival was planned for the end of the month. Bailey confirmed, adding that Count Pervaz was particularly thrilled, as it would be Pervaz's very first harvest festival. Bailey also informed Carlisle that the townspeople had been asking him how they should celebrate the upcoming harvest festival. In his typical straightforward manner, he simply told them, "It's a day to eat, drink, and dance from dawn till dusk." As they continued their stroll, suddenly, Ashia spotted Carlisle and Bailey sitting atop their horses and approached them with graceful ease. The moment Carlisle saw her, he immediately addressed her, saying, "Even if things between us are like this, I am still Count Pervaz's husband. I heard this is your first harvest here, so I had to come and check it out myself." Ashia, ever gracious, thanked Carlisle for showing such care for Pervaz, acknowledging his effort. Carlisle then asked, "Did you say the harvest festival is at the end of this month?" Ashia nodded, explaining that yes, it was true, and she was preparing some questions for Lord Bailey. Although she admitted that her efforts might not be enough in the eyes of those who came from the capital, she expressed her hope that they would all enjoy the festival together. Carlisle, in his usual casual tone, replied, "Just make sure there's plenty of alcohol flowing, and the rest will surely take care of itself." For the first time, Ashia let out a genuine laugh in front of Carlisle, caught off guard by his unexpected humor. The moment was light, but it carried a rare warmth amidst the weight of their current circumstances. A few days later, Ashia instructed the butler to prepare everything outlined on the list for the upcoming harvest festival. As the butler left to carry out her orders, Decker, observing the extensive preparations, hesitantly asked, "Isn't this a bit too much?" Ashia, calm and assured, responded, "His Majesty Carlisle has given us additional support, so it's fine." However, Decker persisted, suggesting, "Wouldn't it be better to save those resources and use them for something else?" Ashia shook her head, resolute in her decision. "No, we should create this memory, at least once." She then reflected for a moment, her voice softening as she recounted a conversation she once had with her father. She had asked him, "What do you want to do when the war is over?" Her father, always gruff, had initially dismissed the question, saying, "You still have strength left to ask things like that?" But Ashia had persisted, "Can't you at least have a dream?" Finally, her father had given in. "When the war ends," he had said, "after farming and harvesting a lot, I want to hold a grand harvest festival. A festival to make sure there's no starvation until the next year's harvest. That way, we can do our best next year as well and maybe feel more connected to the land." Unbeknownst to Ashia, Cecilia had been eavesdropping on the conversation. Hearing all of this, Cecilia found herself reassessing her view of Ashia. She realized that Ashia had a much stronger sense of responsibility for Pervaz than she had previously thought, and that her devotion to her family and territory ran deep. In the Empire, Bibiana Lowry, the Emperor's young mistress, was growing increasingly anxious, her mind consumed by the fact that she had not yet conceived a child. Her maid, sensing her distress, tried to comfort her, reminding her that it was normal for conception to take time. But Bibiana already knew this, and her patience was wearing thin. She needed a child, and she needed one soon, because the longer it took, the more vulnerable her position became. If the second prince, Matthias, continued to accumulate power at this rate, Bibiana feared she would disappear without a trace, erased by palace intrigues as though she had never existed. A burning question gnawed at her. Matthias had been nothing when the crown prince was still in favor, and yet, now, she couldn't believe how expertly she had been used by the Empress's schemes. Her irritation was clear, and seeing Bibiana in such a state, her maid tentatively asked if she should fetch some water. Bibiana, barely acknowledging her, gave permission. As the maid left, Bibiana's thoughts spiraled. The Emperor's favor still gave her hope. If she could bear a son, her position would be secure, and her influence untouchable. But she knew there was no way the Empress would sit idly by and allow that to happen. If only the crown prince hadn't been exiled to Pervaz, they could have kept the empress in check together. Her anger boiled over, and in a moment of fury, she hurled the flower vase to the ground, shattering it into pieces. But as the shards of porcelain lay scattered across the floor, Bibiana's resolve hardened. She had to have a child, and she had to do it as soon as possible. There was no other way to survive in this deadly game of power. Matthias was strolling through the lobby when he overheard a group of maids gossiping about Bibiana's recent outburst. She had thrown a vase in anger over her inability to conceive a child. Without wasting a moment, Matthias rushed to his mother, eager to share the juicy news. He practically burst into the room, excitement clear in his voice as he relayed the scandal to Beatrice, hoping to see her share his amusement. But to Matthias' surprise, Beatrice seemed completely indifferent, her mind elsewhere. She remained deep in thought, not reacting to her son's excitement. Startled by Matthias' persistent prodding, Beatrice snapped back to reality, apologizing softly. Beatrice's face lit up with a cheerful, almost triumphant smile. It seems, she began, her voice laced with satisfaction, that will soon witness Carlin's divorce. Meanwhile, in Pervaz, the day of the harvest festival had finally arrived. Guests from all over had gathered, and the atmosphere was electric. The once quiet land now looked transformed, almost like a different country, with everyone marveling at how Pervaz had blossomed for the occasion. In the midst of it all, a man approached Ashia with news. The meat and alcohol have arrived from Elsir, he informed her, his tone formal. He added that this was the last cart and that they had more than enough stock. We can leave this one for emergencies, he suggested. Ashia gave him a quick nod. Leave it to the chef, she ordered, her focus still on the festival. The man bowed slightly and, as he turned away, a strange, vicious grin crossed his face as he carried the last box. After a while, the grand bell tolled, signaling the start of the much-anticipated harvest festival. As the sound echoed through the town, Carlisle and Ashia made their entrance, walking side by side. The crowd erupted in cheers as they caught sight of Ashia, her beauty radiating in the glow of the festival lights. Ashia, poised and graceful, began her speech. Today is a day of great meaning for our Pervaz, she addressed the crowd, her voice steady and full of pride. In this land that has endured the weight of barbarian invasions for so long, today marks a new chapter, a day to celebrate the harvest of our crops once again. This joy is not just mine, but something for all of Pervaz to share together. Thanks to the grace of His Highness, Carlisle Evaristo, she continued, nodding to Carlisle, we decided to hold this harvest festival. So, today and tomorrow, for these 2 days of celebration, let everyone eat, drink, dance, and sing. As her final words rang out, the festival exploded into life. Ashia, still managing the festivities, ordered the maids to ensure that the food kept flowing so there would be no shortages, and the guests would always have their fill. Amidst the chaos of the festivities, Decker suddenly appeared beside her, his energy vibrant from the excitement of the festival. Grinning, he grabbed Ashia's hand and insisted, "Come on, Ashia, have a drink with me." Decker began downing mugs of beer one after another, and Ashia, noticing how drunk he was becoming, warned him, "Don't drink too much, you're already drunk." She, too, was about to taste beer for the first time. After gulping down a mouthful, she winced, grimacing. "It tastes awful," she commented with a frown. Decker laughed heartily. "It tastes awful to you because you've been sipping high-quality wine next to His Majesty Carlisle. Beer's a whole different thing." They were enjoying their drinks when, suddenly, the rest of Ashia's group joined them, insisting she drink with them as well. The night quickly turned into a festive celebration, with everyone around Ashia drinking and laughing, momentarily forgetting all the burdens and worries that usually weighed them down. Ashia, caught up in the fun, drank a few rounds with her companions until the alcohol finally hit her. Feeling lightheaded and tipsy, she excused herself from the group, deciding to take a quiet stroll to clear her mind. She wandered a bit away from the main party and found a quiet corner in the corridor where she could sit. Thinking no one would find her, she leaned back, hoping to regain her senses. But just as she was settling in, Carlisle appeared, walking towards her with a raised brow. "What kind of drunkard are you?" he teased. "How much did you drink?" Ashia, still feeling the effects of the alcohol, mumbled, "My people kept telling me to drink, so I drank some." Carlisle leaned down slightly, "But what if the Lord drinks so much that she loses her mind? What are you going to do if the barbarians attack at a time like this?" Suddenly, Ashia's eyes widened in alarm, and she sprang to her feet, shouting, "I have to go defend the country. The barbarians, they're attacking us." Carlisle quickly caught her arm, trying to calm her. "No, no," he said, holding back a laugh. "They haven't invaded, at least, not yet. I was just giving you an example." Gently, he pulled her closer, steadying her as she swayed. Realizing her mistake, she suddenly pulled away from Carlin's grasp, her face flushing in embarrassment. Thank you, she said quickly, trying to compose herself. There are more than one or two things to be thankful for, he remarked. So, which one are you thankful for? Ashia, still a bit hazy from the alcohol, explained softly, I wouldn't have been able to pull off the harvest festival without you. Her words trailed off as Carlisle raised an eyebrow and asked, so, are you happy with the deal you made with me now? Ashia nodded, her tone genuine. I'm very happy, Your Highness saved Pervaz. But then a flicker of concern crossed her face, though, I'm worried about how much money you're losing because of this festival. Carlisle smirked, his voice laced with teasing mischief. You're right. So if you think I've helped you this much, shouldn't you feel like showering me with kisses every time you see me? Ashia paused, clearly taking his words to heart. Without any warning, she leaned in and kissed him. But before he could fully respond, Ashia, swaying from the alcohol, fell unconscious in his arms, leaving him even more stunned. Carlisle pulled back slightly, and seeing her unsteady state, he let out a small sigh. Lifting her gently in his arms, he carried her to his room to ensure she could rest properly. The night passed with Ashia asleep, her breath soft and steady. The next morning, Ashia woke up, her head throbbing from a splitting headache. As her eyes adjusted to the light, she turned to find Carlisle sitting right beside her, watching her with a faint, amused smile. You're not looking too good, he commented dryly. Ashia bolted upright in shock. What are you doing here? She stammered, her heart racing. Carlisle raised an eyebrow, his tone curious. You really don't remember anything about last night? Panic swept over Ashia's face. What happened yesterday? She asked, her voice filled with evident surprise and confusion. But then, she noticed something that sent her into a spiral of fear. She wasn't wearing the clothes she had on the day before. Her mind raced, anxiety overtaking her as she whispered, what on earth happened last night? Seeing Ashia so flustered, Carlisle had the urge to tease her further, but he decided against it, not wanting to shock her unnecessarily. Instead, he leaned back and calmly said, last night, I sensed someone near my room. When I went out, I found you, completely crumpled up and fast asleep in the corner of the corridor. I carried you inside to let you rest. Ashia's tension didn't ease immediately. I was sleeping. But what about the harvest festival? I had so much to take care of. Carlisle, still composed, reassured her. Relax. Thanks to the management of Viscount Pervaz's household, everything went smoothly. There was plenty of food and drink, no unpleasant incidents. We did have some children go missing, but we found all their parents by the end of the night. Ashia let out a sigh of relief, but her eyes darted nervously as Carlisle's next question caught her off guard. But more importantly, why aren't you curious about the fact that you're lying in my bed, wearing unfamiliar pajamas? Her heart skipped a beat, and she immediately countered, but didn't you just say nothing happened earlier? So, did something really happen? Carlisle moved closer, sitting beside her on the bed, his tone shifting to something more serious. I did say nothing happened, he affirmed, but I can't help but notice that Viscount Pervaz seems to be treating our contract quite lightly as of late. Ashia frowned, uncertain where this conversation was heading. What do you mean? Carlisle leaned in slightly, his gaze unwavering. The terms we agreed upon, playing the role of a wife on paper and parting ways cleanly afterward, that hasn't changed. But before that parting, I expect you to perform the role of a wife excellently, especially in a way that wouldn't falter even if my mother raised any objections. Carlisle, with a smirk playing on his lips, leaned in slightly and said, it's obvious to anyone that you don't look like my wife, Ashia. At this rate, it'll be easy for anyone to see through the act. In her mind, Ashia couldn't help but think, when has he ever treated me like a wife? The tension between them only seemed to increase with every passing second. Carlisle stood up, his tone turning a bit more serious but still teasing. It seems like you're struggling with this, so I've decided to help you out. He paused, letting his words sink in. Since I went to the trouble of picking you up last night, let's spread the rumor that we've truly become a couple. Ashia blinked, her curiosity piqued. Do you really think everyone will believe that? Carlisle smirked again, this time with more confidence. Normally, no, they wouldn't. But given your drunken state yesterday, it's a story that will stick. Ashia mulled it over, finding his logic plausible yet not fully understanding why they needed to go to such lengths. Why do we need to make such a big deal out of this? Carlisle's demeanor shifted, his voice lowering with gravity. Because Matthias is watching me with suspicion. He's trying to expose any weakness, especially through Viscount Pervaz's household. And worse, the Empress, having heard Matthias's words, is orchestrating something behind the scenes. Ashia furrowed her brow, concern flickering across her face. But what can we do if it's the Empress? Carlisle's gaze hardened. We need to play our roles flawlessly. The Empress is dangerous, but she relies on appearances. If we can keep up the facade of a strong, united couple, it'll be harder for her and Matthias to undermine us. His voice softened for a moment as he added, "For now, the best defense is making sure no one doubts us." Carlisle replied with unwavering determination, "We need to have the marriage legally annulled by the temple. If our marriage is declared invalid due to being unlawful, I'll have to reclaim every coin I invested in Pervaz and return to the palace. So, the question remains, can you do it?" Ashia hesitated, her mind racing. It wasn't as if they had actually crossed any boundaries, it felt like nothing more than a pretense. "Still," she commented, "my entourage will be shocked to hear this." Carlisle shrugged, a playful smirk on his lips. "When you host a banquet at the imperial palace, it's not unusual to wake up in bed with someone like you, is it? So, let's just say we're a couple who has grown a bit closer starting today. This way, the Empress might ease up on her incessant nitpicking." His tone shifted slightly, the smirk fading just enough to convey seriousness. "But remember, Ashia, no matter how friendly I appear on the surface, don't take anything too seriously." Ashia met his gaze with a resolute expression. "You don't need to worry about that," she replied firmly, her conviction clear. The second day of the Harvest Festival began with a whirlwind of gossip echoing through Pervaz Castle, just as His Highness Carlisle had anticipated. Word spread like wildfire, and all the maids and servants found themselves discussing one topic, Carlin's fateful night with Ashia. Soon enough, the whispers reached Cecilia's maid, who wasted no time in relaying the shocking news to her mistress. Cecilia sat in contemplation, her brow furrowed in disbelief. How could this be happening? It baffled her, especially considering that Carlisle had barely acknowledged Ashia since her arrival in Pervaz. Cecilia's eyes narrowed as she questioned her maid, "Are you sure that Ashia spent the night in His Highness's room?" The maid nodded eagerly, explaining, "I heard it from a maid who entered the room yesterday on command. His Highness instructed her to change Count Pervaz's clothes." "But doesn't that just mean it wasn't a big deal?" "It was only a change of clothes," Cecilia countered, trying to rationalize the situation. The maid leaned in closer, whispering conspiratorially, "But His Highness was also wearing only a nightgown. By the time I left, I heard they were in the same bed." Cecilia's fury ignited at the news, a storm of emotions swirling within her. This was not part of her plan at all, and the thought of Ashia and Carlisle together sent her mind racing with schemes and possibilities. Seeing Cecilia's frustration, her maid tried to offer some comfort, saying, "There's no way His Highness Carlisle would ever see Count Pervaz as his real wife. The only thing Count Pervaz excels at compared to young ladies is her fighting skills." Cecilia's eyes narrowed, her expression thoughtful yet determined. "That's only half true. Count Pervaz has earned the trust of the people in her territory, and that's not something that can be achieved overnight." She paused, weighing her options. "But there's still hope. There's a crucial difference between being a good lord and being a good empress. I will be superior as empress." Despite everything she had heard, Cecilia's resolve hardened. She silently vowed to herself that in the end, she would be the one to triumph.